The 5.3 Lantern Rite 4-star Selector roster has now expanded to 11 units, and you're probably wondering to yourself, which one should I pick? Fear not, dear viewer, as I, Kira, shall help you. Hello everyone, my name's Kira, and today I will cover every single 4-star unit in the Lantern Rite Selector as in depth as I can to help you decide who you should pick. Before we actually start though, I would want to emphasize that there's no objectively correct option here. As you'll see later towards this video, it's actually closer to what you personally want, and I will be putting timestamps if you want to jump to any section with no worry. But without further ado though, let's actually begin. Starting off with arguably the best unit on here meta-wise, Xingqiu. He is quite an interesting case nowadays as many people don't have Furina or Yalan, but he's still valid in his own ways. For those who don't know, Xingqiu's elemental burst can apply a really high amount of Hydro from off-field, and this is insanely helpful given that Hydro has been the best element meta-wise for the past 2 years now. He enables Freeze, Vaporize, Electrocharge, Melt, Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, etc. With the amount of versatility Xingqiu has, you can never really go wrong with him here, and all of his constellations are really good, and especially his C2 and C6 are very key constellations. If you don't have Xingqiu yet, he's probably the most important unit that you need, so pick him up if you want to. If you already have him, it's a bit more debatable. More on that later though. Moving on to Gaming. Gaming is a Pyro main DPS that focuses on doing plunge attack damage. As an on-field unit, he inherently has less value though. However, he's quite the interesting case, because despite being a 4-star, at C6 he can actually rival some really strong carries like Hu Tao in damage, which is a very impressive feat for a 4-star unit, but he also has his own weaknesses of course. Before C6 he's quite weak, and his setups are expensive, to say the least, and require a really high amount of skill to really make him shine. For your average player he might not be interesting, but if you happen to have him at C5, he might be worth a pickup meta-wise. And if you already main him, then his copies will be the highest priority until C6. Swiftly moving on to Beiduo, an Electro character that does good off-field damage through her elemental burst. Her true value shines when she gets her C2, where she has very interesting niches, where she does a very high amount of damage if there are 2 enemies on the field. This sounds a bit restrictive, but even in other scenarios she's quite good. Electro has been eating well since Sumeru, and even without Dendro teams, the traditional Taser comp is just really good. Oh, and Overload. Her main weakness is having really high AR requirements, which make building her a pain, which makes her very, and I mean very, reliant on having someone like Fischl for double Electro comps to save on the ER requirements. And those teams haven't been very relevant to the meta as of late, but they are still strong in their own right and can do a lot of damage if used correctly. If you're interested in running double Electro, then she might be worth it, especially if she's below C2 or C6. Otherwise, I don't recommend her in favor of other units. Moving on to our third Claymore unit in a row, Chongyun. He can either be a main DPS dealing cryo damage, or a support that enables cryo infusion to your main DPS. Please don't do the second option, unless you enjoy that, I guess. As a 4-star main DPS, his value is, a little low. His performance is a little mediocre, to be honest. He can definitely be good if you want to use him and, put effort into building him. If you main him, he's worth getting copies for and building up to his okay-ish C6 that makes him good. If you don't use him, I wouldn't recommend it. Shout out to the Burst DPS playstyle that he's occasionally used in. Traditional national team is dead nowadays, but it's arguably his best team as far as I know. Moving on to the new kid, the newest unit here, Lanyan. Her kit is a bit overbloated with words, as any new unit is, but the TLDR is that she has a shield, a bit of crowd control or movement utility, and some of her constellations can slightly buff up your character damage. She seems to be a really versatile character, and emo shielding is a new yet very good niche in non-Furina teams. Her being able to use the TDDS catalyst, which is the Thrilling Tales catalyst, plus the Viridescent Venerer set makes her work in basically any swirlable element team. If you're not planning to pull on phase 2 of 5.3 where she's featured, I would argue she's one of the top pickups here. It's like Xingqiu and then her. Me personally, I will be going for her for collection's sake and because she's adorable. That little bird thing in her drip marketing was so cute. It was the cutest thing ever. I love it, and that's one more reason for it. In all seriousness, no, if you're not pulling in phase 2, she's worth it. Otherwise, you can likely bet on the fact that you'll get her in some of her key constellations, like her C2 and her C4. Moving on to how I wanna call the wild card of this selection. Ninguang is a burst DPS or a main DPS or even a support for Navia, multiple of those roles at once sometimes. It has been a long time since she was relevant in the meta, to be fully honest. A tiny bit of her potential still exists simply because she can support Navia, so if you happen to not have Navia's best supports, she could be worth it. If you main her, you could always build up to her C6 eventually. She's a bit underrated, yet good enough in what she does, and that's why I call her a wild card. And moving on to Xiangling, Miss OPPA herself. If you've been somehow living under a rock, Xiangling is a sub DPS that does off-field pyro damage. A lot of both, mind you, a lot of pyro application, a lot of off-field damage. The highest by far, even when considering Mavuika or Pyro MC, at least application-wise. Damage-wise, Mavuika is closer to higher or equal, even. I will just state the obvious though, for her, if you should pick her up. If you have her at C3, just pick her. Her Constellation 4 is busted and it will always be your most big priority if you don't have her at C4. If you have her at less than C3 and have nobody else to pick up, then she's worth a pickup and then save up Starglitter to get her again from the Starglitter shop. If you wanna know her team versatility, it's a lot of teams. As long as the team allows for Bennett and her, she instantly fits in and is likely the best in slot unit. She's good for burn, vaporize or melt teams, burgeon teams, overload with Chevrus, and I'm probably missing a couple more. Xiangling is a unit I don't need to yap too much about, because she's just known to be that good. If she's at C3, she's the biggest priority for your pickup. If not, then it depends on what you want and what you need for your account. Generally, she's gonna be still a top pickup until you reach Constellation 4. Xiangling out of the way though, let's discuss a bit of a more unique case. Yao Yao. She's a healer that applies off-field Dendro, and she's one of the most important cornerstones for F2P Dendro teams at the time of recording this. Any Dendro-related team she'll thrive in. The reason she's so prominent is because the second best option, Kirara, is only really valid as Constellation 4 or higher. Meanwhile, Yao Yao is perfectly fine at C0, sorry. And she has no other F2P replacements. Baiduo is quite hard to pick up nowadays because each of his reruns, including the one that's gonna come in the 5.3 Chronicled Wish, is usually before, after, or with some of the better units in the entire game. I'm talking like Furina, Arlecchino, Mavuika, like, come on man. I've been wanting Baiduo since my return to Genshin in 4.1. I genuinely can't pick him up. And I won't be able to do that in 5.3 unless I get the most unfathomable, godly, insane, horrifying luck in the universe, which I won't, so yeah. Small rambling aside though, what's Yao Yao's value? If your account is still new and being built up, I heavily recommend her after Xingqiu. The best part about Dendro teams is that they help build up a strong core for your account to do a lot of damage off of without much effort. So if you're struggling DPS wise or just want to build up your account to slowly clear the game, she's one of the most important cornerstones to do that after Xingqiu. And until you build other stronger teams that out DPS your Dendro teams, she's amazing. If you already have her though, then she's a bad pickup because her constellations are very much worthless or just don't do anything at all. Moving on to a more simple unit to discuss, Yanfei. She's a pyro DPS who at Constellation 4 can have a small shield. Please don't do the second playstyle unless you really enjoy that. Deja vu. Her value as a DPS is inherently lower as usual. Along with that, she suffers from the pyro DPS curse, where she does a good amount of damage, but then suffers from really annoying and clunky gameplay, and as a catalyst user, she's quite the squishy unit and dies easily. She's only worth a pickup if you're a fan of her, or a really dedicated fan, I mean. But meta-wise, she's probably one of the worst pickups, sadly. She has her uses though, like the shield thing is okay. It can work, but I don't recommend it personally. Moving on to another bad pickup, Yunjin. I don't mean to be negative from the start, but Yunjin is just a character that can buff your normal attack damage, and she, on top of that, she has a lot of team building and restriction, with the character herself being quite difficult to build. The normal attack buff sounds good on paper, but if you look at it in practice, it's just not worth the sacrifices. She's probably the second worst pickup in the entire game, if not the straight up worst. If you want to use her, then I recommend getting her to C6, I guess, to make her actually usable. At last, we have Xinyan. She's arguably the worst unit on here. However, she actually has some use cases. Xinyan is either pyro or physical main DPS if you want to do that, or a physical burst DPS that split scales on def and attack percent. I frankly don't want to get into why that's problematic design. You probably already heard it a million times by now. Oh, and she has a shield at not at Constellation. She has a shield that applies a bit of off-field pyro. Can work, like she can if you want her to. Like just barely work, she can. But meta-wise, she's probably the worst pickup. If we do main her, it's worth trying to build up to her C6, I suppose. But she's all like good. Not much to say here. I'm sorry, chat. I tried finding the words. We're done with explaining each unit now, but that's probably making you wonder, what's the best pickup here? Especially with how nuanced my wording was, you're probably like confused. And I'm sorry about that. But frankly, the true answer is simply, it depends. What team do you want to run or currently want to run? What unit do you like? What constellation is each of your units? Each question has infinite answers, there's infinite combinations that I just can't cover all of them. The TLDR of it is, if you need off-field Hydra for any of your teams, get Xingqiu and his copies. If your Xiangling is C3, she's always your best pickup to get her 4th constellation. If you need an Avia support, then Ninguang is good. If you need a versatile shielder, then Lanyan is the best pickup. If you want to build up your account or your Dendro teams, get Yao Yao. The rest are, let's say, comfort picks. You only pick them up if you like their character a lot or their playstyle, etc. Before moving on to the outro though, what if multiple of those overlap? And the answer is, get the most needed one currently. If you need the Hydro more than anything, Xingqiu, the Dendro, Yao Yao, Pyro, then Xiangling, etc. I know that sounds a bit weird, but like let's say you want to run like a Hyper Bloom team and you already have Dendro MC and Ecole, so you need the Hydro from say Xingqiu, and then you can use like Lisa or Cookie for Electro. As an example, like, get the character that's most important, the one that doesn't have any replacements or very little ones, or the replacements are bad. With that YAP Fest out of the way, I covered the many options provided in the 5.3 selector, and hopefully helped you decide who you want to wish for or build. If you found this video entertaining and informative, please like and subscribe. I am very close to 100 subs, currently 91 as of recording, and I appreciate any of your support. Tell me in the comments down below which unit you're gonna pick and why. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and goodbye.